Good afternoon and welcome to the Right on Crime podcast. My name is Danny Murphy. I'm Right on Crime's Virginia and West Virginia State Director, and I have the pleasure of sitting with my friend and colleague, Joey Comley. Joey?
I'm Joey Comley, and I'm the State Director for Kentucky here at Right on Crime, and Danny and I are old friends, so it's a reunion every time TPPF or ROC allows us to get together. So
yeah, that's right.
Pleased to be here.
That's right. So Joey and I are former colleagues and friends from the Army. You and I worked together in the Pentagon for a couple of years, and there's probably just no better place to work than the Pentagon, I would say, right? The Pentagon is just the most wonderful place.
I miss it every day.
Yes.
There was an eerie smell when I actually hit the entry corridor that immediately made me feel nausea and as if I had forgotten something.
Yes.
So I love a sickening feeling right when you walk into a building. It's really nice.
So I still suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder from my time at the Pentagon, but nonetheless,
you got a second dog though, so that's good.
That's
Maybe
right.
One of them can be trained as a service animal.
So both Joey and I are both former Army judge advocates, both attorneys, followed similar career paths. Mine was a little bit better. My career was a little bit better than Joey's. Regardless, we wound up, right? We both retired from the Army. We both joined Right on Crime.
It was so much better. We ended up in the exact same spot. So
here's my first question for you. Here's my first
Brilliant.
question. My first question is for you is in the Army and then even presently. You currently serve as a defense counsel, but you're a former prosecutor as well, right?
First off, I'm not sure why you're questioning me, but
okay,
I'll play along. That's right.
So,
sorry, that's correct.
As we both work in our states, you in Kentucky, me in Virginia and West Virginia, to advance conservative criminal justice reforms, I'm curious, in your mind, first of all, I know you currently serve as a defense counsel. Are you a defense counsel, or are you a prosecutor, or are you a blend of both of those in terms of what makes you, what makes Joey?
I'm a staunch believer in second chances, right? And I think it's because of my faith that I'm able to be a defense counsel and a defense counsel first, and I'm able to do it with the clearest of conscience and pride every morning when I wake up and shave.
Right.
And I think, I realize that our system is imperfect, and that system starts, I think, with conduct, and I think it transitions from conduct to apprehension and investigation, and I think all of those systems have their own potential flaws. I think by the time you get into court, there's really no more honorable thing than to stand up next to an individual who has to argue their innocence, which is already presumed, against a state or a federal authority. I think that is the purest picture of liberty being exercised. You're defending someone's freedom and liberty. And as much joy as I got from prosecuting, horrible cases of abuse and vindicating victims, often child victims, and the relationships forged with those individuals, I think at the end of the day, there was something in me that still had compassion for the accused.
Right.
The person that I convicted. I knew that someone loved them, and damn it, if there was no one that loved them on this earth, then it should be me. Somebody should have love and compassion for that person, and not saying they shouldn't go to prison, and sometimes for a very long time, but someone should show them a measure of humanity.
Yeah.
And I think that got tough to do as a prosecutor, because I started seeing just the evil in the people I was prosecuting.
Right.
So doing some time as a defense counsel was good for me. I think that obviously at the end of the day, I'm a father and a husband, and I want and believe in safe communities. I think safe communities are prosperous communities, and I think they yield, just generations of people who meaningfully contribute to society.
Right.
So that's obviously my paramount goal in my existence. But professionally, I really love being a defense counsel.
So I think through the bulk of my career leading up to joining Right on Crime, I was a prosecutor. And so I was a prosecutor, was not a defense counsel in the Army, and was a prosecutor throughout, largely the bulk of my Army JAG experience. And then, of course, I was a prosecutor with the U.S. Attorney's Office for a couple of years as well. I was struck by a particular experience that I had. So when I was prosecuting some drug and fraud crimes in the Western District of Virginia, I was particularly struck when I, on 2 separate occasions, prosecuted the same person twice. And so what do I mean by that? A person came into our system, prosecuted that person. The person is convicted for the crime and is eventually incarcerated and commits
does their time and reoffends,
or in one case was offended while incarcerated, right?
Okay.
And so I was struck by this and thinking to myself, how the system is failing if all we're doing is sending people into the clink, into the jail systems, right? The prison systems.
To temporarily separate them from society.
But doing nothing while they're in to actually reform or rehabilitate the individual. And upon their release, releasing them back directly into the environment from which they came, from which they had nothing to begin with. And so your community, your state is at least geographically is close to both of my states, West Virginia and Virginia, of course. And so they're particularly in the Appalachian region, is just a very impoverished region. Obviously, there are pockets of affluence and opportunity and business and that sort of thing. But there are a lot of communities that are very impoverished, right?
Sure.
And so it's those communities that largely breed property crimes, substance abuse, drug crimes. Very often, people who have very little don't have career opportunities, and I'm not. For any number of reasons, we won't get into what the causes are for those, but I'm of the mindset that if all we do is release, we catch and release people right back into the same communities.
All we did was warehouse them for a time period.
That's exactly right.
We shelved them so that they could only be a harm to themselves or others who were similarly situated. No one cares when a toy on a shelf breaks the toy next to it. It's not owned by anyone.
Right.
It's in a warehouse.
Right.
Which is essentially what you're talking about here. I will contrast one time, because my experience in representing individuals is such that I represent military criminal accused.
Okay.
Harken back to your prosecution days in the military. How many repeat offenders did you see?
Well, of course, but that the military is not set up to
precisely. But that's why I am able to see the good in a lot of my clients, because they're individuals who've made, I would say, one of the most honorable decisions they could ever make in raising their right hand to serve this country. But I don't see them more than once. Ideally, whatever they do, if they're convicted, it results, oftentimes in a discharge.
Right.
And if they're discharged, then they go back to wherever they're from. Now, sure, some of them are from Kentucky, right? Or that Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, Virginia region.
Right.
But I don't see repeat offenders. So I don't see the folks that are, the product of persistent, violent offenders or, 3 strikes provisions or kind of people that are career criminals. Folks, when they get acquitted and they go back to their unit in the Army, they don't become better criminals. They continue to receive their pay. They're not experiencing any of the circumstances that come from the experience of a criminal accused in a state system where their entire life was disrupted. They don't have the job to go back to. They likely don't have the vehicle. They probably don't have the same home. And they've probably broken their entire family existence. Yep. Going back to your point, I completely agree that we cannot have a system that ignores that reality, that ignores the circumstances that lead people into criminal behavior, and that pulls them back to criminal behavior when they've been, quote unquote, reformed by incarceration.
Right.
We know that alone doesn't work.
I agree with you. I want to shift to something that I struggle with, and I'm curious your thoughts on it. First of all, I think it's beyond argument that well, obviously crime destroys families. And I don't want to say that prosecution destroys families, but there are aspects of our criminal justice system, if left unreformed and unchecked, that actually hurt families and hurt our ability to build and develop strong family organizations or communities that can develop more resilient individuals. And so you've touched on this previously, particularly with your work in the juvenile system. What are your thoughts on that? How do we focus? Obviously, criminal behavior has to be addressed. Nonviolent criminal behavior does not mean that it's victimless behavior. Property crimes have victims, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so, but how do we balance the interests of adequately prosecuting and punishing those who commit nonviolent crimes with the need to not just totally destroy the fabric of the family? How do you propose we balance that?
I think it starts early on. And when I say early on, I mean in the life cycle of a human being, that any of us could be prone to criminal conduct on any given day. You carve out the right circumstances, and they're in every Hollywood plot, right?
Right.
There's some movie you see where you're like, I can relate to that. Under those conditions,
Sure.
I might commit criminal activity because my children's life is at risk, and I have to take immediate action to save them.
Right.
And I don't know that there's a limit to what I might do to rescue any of my 3 children. If there is, I haven't seen it yet, right? And a lot of that would probably be criminalized. But I think what we have to get after is the conditions and the environs
Yes.
that lead to criminal behavior. And that's at, if you look at our youth, you're talking about 2 places. That's schools and that's their homes. Where do children spend the majority of their lives while they're, pre-K or K or preschool, if you're lucky enough to have that paid for, in your state, through 12th grade?
Right.
It's either at school or at home. And if both of those environments are ones that are controlled by criminal activity or criminal influences, or their overwhelming poverty, I think you're breeding criminal behavior. You're essentially pushing youth to take desperate action,
Right.
to change their circumstances. And I think that when we as a community and we as states and we as a nation ignore that or overlook it, I think we do just generational harm, not only for those kids who are one day going to be adults, who are either raised in stable, successful, prosperous homes, or they're raised in unstable, broken, impoverished homes. And I think when you have the latter, they can often end up in the criminal justice system, and then they're influencing the next generation.
That's right.
And what type of home are they building when we don't reform them in our correctional systems and we send them back into those same communities? It's why you see the same communities that are victimized and re-victimized over and over again. It's why you see people fleeing those communities. It's why they don't go back and shop in those communities, because of the property crimes. And that creates victims because of the circumstances and the effect it has on the community.
No, I
when
agree
those
with you.
businesses aren't making money, they can't hire people, the families are poor, and they're more desperate.
I totally agree with you. In fact, what I would say, and I share with legislators from both Virginia and West Virginia is I think when people are looking at the criminal justice system, we all too often focus on the output, the back end of the criminal justice pipeline. We need to increase punishments. We need
the
to
effect as opposed to the cause.
That's exactly right. And so when all you're doing is increasing the size of the hammer that you're going to whack the mole with,
That's right.
You're not focusing on addressing the actual underlying issues that drive criminal behavior. And so if you're truly tough on crime, if you truly want to make your communities safer, you ought to be focusing your efforts and your policy and your funding towards addressing the cause of criminal behavior, right? And so I've commended publicly before Governor Youngkin's initiative in Virginia, where he's increasing funding exponentially for mental health treatment and services and bringing opportunities and services closer to those in need. But that's just one step, right?
And those need to exist in prisons, because just like the schools and the homes are the most influential environments on the children, when their lives go astray and they enter the system, we have to have similar programs operating in correctional facilities so that folks that are there don't become better criminals. They're not influenced by individuals who have chosen a lifetime of crime.
That's right.
And criminal enterprise. They're influenced by all of the positive, reformative programs, because they're overwhelming the voice and the influence of those, handful of people that have chosen a actual life of crime.
You're right. Joey, you're a good man. You're working hard in Kentucky, and it's my pleasure to continue to work with you on this good work that we're doing. And ladies and gentlemen, to find out more about these issues and more conservative solutions from across the nation, please visit our website at rightoncrime.com.